Предсказания на годы вперед. Записано 27 ноября 88-го. Этот недельный график свингов хорошо показывает тенденцию, начиная от 1874. Раньше вы могли торговать только акциями, но с 1874 фактически начал торговаться индекс. Мы шли вверх и дошли до 1929 года и хорошенько откатили. Затем опять вверх до 69-го. В 68-м начали формировать тройную вершину, и затем падали до 74-го. Я проводил разные расчеты. Например, откат 29-го в 2 раза меньше отката 69-го. Можете считать дни, недели, годы, что хотите, но по сути это одно и то же. Вы работаете с кругом, то есть циклом. Вы всегда возвращаетесь к 90-летнему или 60-летнему циклу. Посмотрите эти циклы и увидите, что происходит. Если прочтете «Туннель сквозь воздух», там, где герой пишет Кеннелворсу, отцу его друга, он описывает 100-летний цикл. Я верю, что «Туннель сквозь воздух» был больше биографией, так как, вероятно, Gann писал то, как видел самого себя. Там он пишет, что терял и скатывался 40 раз. Теперь он рассказывает про знакомую до 4-й минуты.
A different complexion on the way you look at a lot of things. I'll tell you, it really does. You can get yourself, I couldn't get myself all heavy about the future. Whatever it says about living in the present, I agree with 100%. I find it's the way I go best. I remember we were yarning about something one night, and Wilma, Eric's wife, who's a great friend of mine and a lovely person, she said, oh, she shares, and she's a bit worried about him or something, you know. And I said, look, we're talking over a period of at least another. I said, well, I'm not really sure. I didn't want to get into the bit where I was saying, you know, get out of everything about, and it was interpreted a certain way. But it was really getting things right out of proportion. And I have to stay in the right proportion and keep my head right and just look at the present. Now,
Gann серьезно рассматривал 100-летний цикл, а также 60 и 90 лет. На недельных графиках мы постоянно используем 90 градусов по времени, и это работает постоянно. В 85-м мы брали 2 вершины. Они на расстоянии 179 дней. Мы берем дату изменения тренда, добавляем 90 градусов. И это работает.
We saw where we had the date in October, the date in April. They were the twin tops. It was 179 days, if you remember, when we did the calculation. We worked out that it was very, very close to 180 degrees, as close as you could get on those particular astrological charts we were using. And we got a major change in trend, and that was 85, 86, it happened all through 86, it happened in 87, and it's happened in 88. So the 90-day theory holds a fair bit of water as a result of my analysis.
Если посмотреть с начала 1889 до 1929, прошло 40 лет, а вот 29 40 лет дает 69. Видите, как работает? А если прибавим половину, то есть 20, то получаем 89.
So I mean, we're starting to see this thing work out. Over that period of time, over 40 years, we're seeing that the market did it again and once again. Well, if we're talking a 50% time frame between 1929 and 1969, we come up with 1989. We just come up with that just by simple addition and just looking at the thing. It's a time to be careful. Now, say we're saying that there's some date from here and times are squaring out all the way. We see we had a number of tops up there. So if 1931, not 1932 as it was in America, if 1931 was our date of major drama,
также мы можем взять 31 год, самое драматическое время. Добавим 40, получаем 71 год. Вершины дают вершины, низины дают низины. На дневках тоже так. Вершины через равные промежутки времени дают вершины. Последователи волн Эллиота тоже такое рисуют. Многие из них мне писали. В общем, сейчас мы на половине пути цикла 40 лет. Поэтому я скажу, что я настроен вверх, но если рынок продолжит идти вверх, то я буду очень внимателен в 89 году. Мои последние расчеты за 5 лет ведут к 1989. Теперь он рассказывает, как с интервалом в 30 градусов образовывались вершины и низины в 10-11 числах месяца. И говорит, что если рынок пойдет выше, то в 89-м будет что-то очень серьезное. И до 9,5 минуты ничего нового. In July last year, I had the date for the September high. I had the date for the November low. That was one day out. I had the 12th of November. It turned out on the 11th. And I had the date of the 10th of February, which worked out just spot on. Also, the date of the December low was about the 11th or 12th of December. And on that chart, you'll see it come up quite close if you get that quarterly contract. And the 11th of January was a major low until it moved up for the 18th of January high. The 11th was the low of the month until it went down and broke it coming to the February low. So on those 30 degrees that was lining up too. We had all the 30s together for 90. We get 30, 60 and then we get the 90. That was all conforming. Now that's small stuff, but on the overall scale it leads me to come to a conclusion that this first pullback we've had, if that's what it is, and that's a nice word for a 1,000-point drop, if that was, it's the beginning of something pretty nasty. Like if that's a pullback, now that's if it keeps going back up, like that's a formula. Look what it did here. It just had those sorts of jagged tops and then a pullback. Рынок невероятно сильно идет вверх. Такую же силу мы наблюдали и на рынке соевых бобов. От вершины 996 вниз, от вершины 10.03 вниз. Невероятно сильное движение. Но дальше больше. Это особенность этого рынка. Также будет и с рынком Австралии.
if we're just on a pullback now to say a double top, which is I think about the best we can handle, if we're in for that, when it comes off this next one, it's going to be pretty serious. Now, my calculations give us
У нас есть еще время до следующего года. Мои расчеты говорят, что будет вершина в начале октября 89. Пусть это будет база для торгового плана. Так же, как мы в прошлый раз делали, когда торговали для упражнения. Я бы сказал, 2-3 октября 89-го. Это очень важное время. Недавно приезжал мой друг и привозил дневные данные по рынку с 1915 года. Я себе тоже приобрел. Это позволит мне быть более точным. Я смотрю на эти вещи проще. Мне достаточно понимать, что Земля вращается по кругу Солнца, и не нужно разных заумностей. Я отслеживаю просто циклы и не обращаю большого внимания на астрологические вещи. Был важный разворот 25 августа прошлого года. Мы вычислили эту вершину. Реально вершина была 21. Кстати, фьючерсы развернулись 18 числа. И заметьте, они всегда раньше разворачиваются, чем наличный рынок. Не думайте, если фьючерсы расчеты не сошлись, то ничего страшного. Все должно сходиться. Также был разворот 21 сентября. Назовем это одним месяцем от 25 августа. Пусть только кто-то скажет, что это на 4 дня раньше. Я знаю, но нас это не волнует. Итак, на основании расчетов я считаю, что конец сентября, начало октября будет вершиной. Так как предыдущий разворот наличного рынка был 3 числа, то скажем, что и в этот раз тоже так будет. Американский рынок идет чуть-чуть впереди, поэтому мы по нему ориентируемся для австралийского рынка. Поэтому вполне разумно предположить, что американский рынок образует вершину на месяц раньше, возможно 3 сентября. В 29-м вершина была 3 сентября на уровне 381. Можете с 381 проделать разные расчеты времени. Так что 3 сентября важное время, как считал Gann. После разворота, думаю, он пойдет вниз до ноября, еще один лоу в декабре, и в целом медвежий рынок до 91-го. Если 1969 был основной вершиной и продлился до 71-го, этого же и будем ждать в этот раз, с 89 по 91. К сожалению, в этой аудитории почти никто. Нет людей, которые пережили настоящий медвежий рынок. Последний серьезный откат был даже не по времени, а больше по цене. Он длился всего 54 дня. Последний откат был уже 126 дней, то есть в 2,5 раза больше. Это говорит о том, что может произойти. Увеличивается время отката. Рынок нам говорит, что это будет. Любой, у кого есть акции, будет глупцом, если не скинет их, увидев двойную вершину в 89 году. Я очень-очень серьезно говорю это. И опять он повторяет, что 100-летний цикл очень важен. Gann говорил, я делаю это с помощью циклов, но я пока не скажу каких. так как мир еще не готов. Дэвид говорит, что все это понимает, но ему не подходит так глубоко лезть в эти вещи. Говорят, 1875 было плохое время. Смотрите, какой был откат. В процентном сравнении с последующими он был самый большой. Затем он опять повторяет про 89-й год. Потом он минут 10 рассказывает, как он в прошлом году был бычья настроен на акции. Потом рассказывает про недвижимость, которую банки распродавали, про семью банков и как она зарабатывала на простых гражданах, про сделки с недвижимостью и вообще непонятно, про циклы видео или про недвижимость. Много раз он повторяет то, что идет вверх, однажды должно пойти вниз. И что не следует торговать деньгами, взятыми в долг. Фактически итог этого диска укладывается в 10 минут. Про то, что важны столетние циклы, нужно смотреть месяцы разворота на истории. И все. До конца диска нет ничего больше полезного. Something's going to happen. We're having longer rundowns in time now than we had off the big crash. Why? I think it's not going to go right on its tail now. It's moved about a quarter as far in price, or less than a quarter as much, in twice the time. It hasn't got the acceleration. I just can't see it bouncing away and breaking 1332 and out with the shotgun. I can't see that happening, but it is telling us something. Anyone who's holding stock, I feel, would be bordering on the foolish if they ignored a double top that time in 1989. I would say that very, very strongly. Now, to back that up, Gann quotes his 100-year cycle for transportation, where the railroad with the kingdom, the steamers came in. He said America was crossed by rail and by air about 100 years after the steamers had crossed by sea. You know, they swapped out of the wind power to the steam power. He quotes all of these things in Tunnel Through the Air when he writes for this Mr. Kenilworth, and he says that I do it all by cycles. He said, I'm not about to explain what the cycles are because the world isn't ready for it yet. He said, it's not my business to explain them, just to say they're there. And I can understand that. I can live with that. I know getting deeply, explaining how the cycles go and everything out of the Bible, it's not I don't sort of live comfortably with it. I don't mind just discussing, seeing how the market is, having a bit of a yarn, but it doesn't suit me to get all deep about these things. But it does pay me to look at them as an intelligent way of seeing what goes up must come down at some time. Now, they say that 1975 was a bad time, but you know, our high in the stock market there, and one of the biggest downturns we ever had, see, this isn't in proportion. There is only 10 points there. We had a huge pullback from 10 back to about, what would we be? About 6 there. We had that pullback in 1989. More banks closed in 1989, 1889. More banks closed in 1891 than closed in 1932, and our population was about half the size. More banks in numerical number closed. More banks. And I mean, our population was a lot bigger in 1931. The currency was in real trouble. Bank closures, wool prices failed, and they had that barring crisis in London. And it ran down then to a period of about 1894. Now I can live with that. I can live with that on a 100-year cycle. I can live with the last top around 1991, or perhaps 1889 is our last top. The 1054 low is what's going to tell the story. If the market keeps moving along the way it's moving, and it gives every sign it will,
You know, the strong money like AMP and people like that with the shares producing the sort of income they do, they're not going to sell it and put their money in nothing. You know, they're in there. But watch that dear money. All the companies are geared up now, basically. Everyone's having a go. Look at mine, up to his ears. Who am I to comment on him? He's a multi-millionaire flying around in his corporate jet. And I'm borrowing the missus's blessed little turbocharged Daihatsu. I'm not trying to compare me to him or anything else. But what I am saying is that he's geared a lot heavier than me. I'll give you the drum. He's geared a lot heavier than me. Elders are gearing right up. Banks are much the same. I was very, very bullish on bank shares in November last year. Super bullish. I could see everything they had going for them. And my friend who trades with me and who's as good a mate as I've got, I was telling him bank shares are the go-ers. No matter what happens, I was looking at how far they'd fallen, what they had, the real estate they own, you know, compared to bank shares overseas or anything. I felt they were terrific. The money was in the bank. And you know what they've been doing ever since then? As a result of this property boom, they've been selling off property and leasing it back. Everywhere you look, you know, you'll see all those ads in the paper. There's a big string of bank sales. Now look at it this way. Reduce everything back to just a small level and think how you think, because banks are made up of people just like us. It's the people that motivate the markets. Say you've got a pretty strong family in a city like Toowoomba, the good old days, a conservative family, and they've owned a big hardware store on the biggest block in town. They own about a quarter of the block. It's pretty common. If you went to Rockhampton, Maryborough, Bundaberg, you'd find a family like it. They're often a hyphenated name. Good luck to them. But you know what I'm talking about. They're nice and solid. And it's been in that town, like they are the town. You look through the mayors and the good jobs and that, and basically they've had a control of them, either an in-law or someone like that, over the last 100, 150 years. And you get the new blokes going to Harvard Business School. Oh. You know, they come back all again, not only Harvard, mate, we got business schools too, also, wherever they go, but half the time it's this imported rubbish. They come back with all of these ideas, and what's one of the first things they do is they get quarter of a chance. They sell the real estate and lease it back. Now, how strong do you think that family is? Oh, they get millions. You know, the old property, I mean, she's got the crook old red brick in Ipswich. They did it all over the place. But just about, you see it in car dealerships too. My dad was a Holden dealer. I've had a car dealer's licence just about all my life. I've often battled my way through a tough time buying and selling used cars. I know the game pretty well. I know a lot of the new car dealers, knowing them since I was a kid, know them on extremely good terms. And when they start selling the property and leasing it back, the expansion, and you get the money cheap off the finance company, all those sorts of things at the time, I'll tell you, it's dynamite. So what happens? The family company sells off all the real estate, leases it back, the property portfolio goes down to zilch, but they invest in all these smart things, and inventory goes up, and by progressively running the money, they can make a tremendous gain at the time, but they've lost their linchpin, their real estate. Now, similarly, where Australian banks were tremendous investing over many, many years, their real estate content now is getting less and less and less. They're putting it into the share market. That's why now it's in strong hands. But I'm telling you, if ever this thing really lets go and gets going, you know, the Japanese market falls apart. They've been the buyers of our real estate boom, per se. They've paid the unreal figures, and we've gone along and we've matched them. And we're all involved in the thing. But if by any, and what goes up must come down. Remember the story in 1927 that Gann wrote about? Well, if you remove that over to Japan, the land now there is just right out of all control. Prices for land in Tokyo, is it going to just keep on going up for the first time ever in history? Perhaps it might. I don't know. Japanese might have it sorted out. But I tend to think no. Even the Japanese, with all their automation and their tremendous intelligence and their work, They've got all of these things now. To pay off a family home takes about 2 generations. That's what it takes. Now you imagine if things get shaky out there and they've got to sell properties out here, what are they going to be worth? Palm Meadows Golf Course, see? We first sold that, we put that together and sold it for 1.8 million. Then it was sold for 5.5 million as a casino, as a bid for the casino. That fell over. Then it was sold to the Japanese for 11.8 million. The one property was a cow paddock owned by the Nielsen's. And not the Nielsen's, Nielsen Road. Nielsen were the other side. Didn't forget the name of the family now that owned it. But, you know, that went along. Now they're valuing it at 200 million. They're saying that. I mean, that's what they value it at. I don't know. They spent a lot of money doing it up. But I still see it as a cow paddock, a pretty good cow paddock. But it's a long way from 1.8 million. And that was only in 1982. All of that stuff, we ran that as a casino site. I put in, if I was the agent, but it was a real, all sort of, everyone joined in the centre. I put up 10,000 of the 100,000 we had to put up for our bond to run for the casino. We had the best site, we had the inside running. And we got the mail from our political fellows. They said, you're going to be pulled out, you're too strong, Jennings is going to get it. They said it's between Jennings and Kornhauser. And they said a person, a rotund little chap, is pushing Kornhauser, and they said another chap, don't you worry about it, is pushing Jennings. And they said, who do you think's going to get it? But I said, you're not. And they said, you've got the best application, that's why you won't be on the shortlist. We had the best site. Remember, one of the requirements for the casino site was all the amenities you'd give to the area for sporting. What happened to that? I forget about that. You know, nothing happened to it. It was the normal thing. But we were pulled out. I know that paddock well. I can't now accept that it's worth $200 million. I'm sorry. Now, that's what we're not talking about inflation here. The cost of palm trees and putting in a lake. Like, it was all floodplain land. It wasn't riverwood land, a couple of hills. But, you know, that's what we're up against now. Now, that's the values we've got. Japan's worse. So if the whole lot lets go, it's a reasonably serious time. So, you know, my advice is you work it through on all these things. You look at 1889, like exactly, I'm sorry, and what does it say before? This is an old chart. This was written in 1985, nearly an antique. This was written in 1985. What happened there in 1884? 1984, what happened? Strong inflow of overseas capital. What got our real estate off the deck in 82, George, on the Gold Coast? Strong inflow of overseas capital. This was written in 85. What happened just before the boom? 1888, 1889. What happened? Speculative property boom. You know, like it's written. It's like picking those lows off that circle chart. It's over. It happened. If you want to argue with me whether we had a top or not on the 21st of April 1986, it's like betting on the replay of a football game because it's your favourite team. The Seagulls or Bulldogs or someone get betting and Bjorn here takes a video of it. It's like betting again on the replay. Like, this has all happened. We had the most banks closed in 1891. So that's what we're talking about, and that's half of this safety in the market seminar that I talk about. I just say to people that you really have to have your head screwed on at present about where you've got your dough. Now, I'm not one for pulling the dough out of the banks and putting it under the bed or anything like that. Nothing like that. You know, I think that I don't see the banks as all closing into this drama, but I still wouldn't like to have whatever I've got sitting in, say, the building societies, because look at the S&Ls in America. You know, I mean, I think I'll just stick to a legitimate sort of a bank. You know, no punts, I won't worry about the extra 1% that so-and-so might pay. I think it's a time for that, I really do think it is. I don't think it's a time to be borrowing money to buy shares. Say the market is going up, and should any of you be trading in commodities, if you're going to trade in the index, I wouldn't suggest you do it on borrowed money. I wouldn't suggest that. I'd sit on the fence. That's just my suggestion. But I'd look closely at all that. I'd watch 89 closely. I'd watch, should that be the top? Should we have a pullback? I'd say if around the 18th of December, the 18th of November, sometime around that next year, should we hit a low of about 1,054, it's probably excellent buying. It's just a triple bottom on our weekly swing chart that we have. That's going to be looking quite good. But I'll tell you what, if it lets go, if it goes below that, I'd be very, very cautious. She could keep going. I'd say if it does, the share price index contract is heading for about 500. It'll go to about half. 458 is our all-time low. You never know, it can overrun and hit that too. I don't say it's going to nothing, but that's the sort of thing could happen. But my most likely scenario, based on timing, the same as I've given you all here today, my most likely scenario is a top in 89, a pullback, and then the last stages of the bear market, where the most money is made. It could easily, the market will do whatever it has to do to fool most of the people. On the last run up, it could break the 24 that we've had as a top and go to 36. There's reasons why it could in 91. It could be the last boom to end all boom, but that's what it will do. Should it not be a triple top, should it go over that, it's just more, it's not on firm ground. It's got that 100-year cycle, it's got heaps of cycles. But I mean, some of these things are working out to the day. Enough that I was right to the day of the top last time, I was right on the two bottoms. So it's not too far out by the same calculations. I get a top in 89, I get a pullback, and then I get a question mark. But either way, with the violence of coming into the market, when it lets go, it's going to be the likes of which we haven't seen. We'll have a pullback for at least 4 or 5 years, and they'll be tough years, they'll be years of panic. It'll be worse than like the Gold Coast ever saw. I saw property values go by half then, so I mean worse than half. Worse than the 50%. Property works the same way. A 50% pullback is a tremendous buying opportunity, as we saw on the Gold Coast. The property values were about cut in half, and I mean they were great buying. You could have bought that. Yeah, about half. Like that was a real tough buy. If you got right at the wrong time, they were at about half, a 50% pullback. But I mean, if we break that 50% in our stock market thing, we're in a lot of trouble. Now we went from 23.46 back to 1,000, which is more than a 50% pullback in price. But if you look at range, if you put 458 underneath it, realise we didn't come from zero, do a few things, it doesn't look quite so bad, but it doesn't look quite so good. So that's basically how I see the times coming up. There are times when you want to be pretty professional about trading the market. I believe with commodities, once again, the commodities will go where the dollar goes, where everything else there. It says wool prices fall. And we'll have exactly the same thing. The same thing happened after 1929, export prices collapse, it all falls. Why we'll have such a bad time then is that there won't be the return in the shares. Why they're going up now is they got that steam engine driving them. You've got the big returns coming to the shares. People are not going to share them. But if those returns drop off, you imagine now, the market's all looking a bit iffy. Imagine if the National Bank bought out a return that its returns had dropped by 50%, not up by 31%. Imagine if that was Nobby Clark's story. He gets up there and he says all of a sudden, now what we've done, we've made 20% of what we made last year. Or he gets up and says, the National Bank has made a loss. Who's going to buy the shares then? So, if the whole thing goes like it does, commodity prices go down low, you want to be careful. But I'm not all doom and gloom about the thing. It's one day at a time, and I can see the market looking pretty strong at present. But it definitely is a time to put your thinking back on. And that's basically how I see the timing of the thing. They're basically the days that I see, and I see them pretty clearly. And that's about where we're at. And that's everything. Okay?